All right, so today we're diving into something pretty dark, pretty disturbing, but also fascinating, and I think really important. We're going to talk about incels.
Okay.
And how they become radicalized.
Right.
So you've probably heard the term incel before.
Yeah.
It stands for involuntary celibate. Yeah, you've probably seen the headlines about, violence and hate and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
But I think a lot of people might be surprised to learn that the incel movement actually started way back in the 1990s as like a support group.
Yeah, it's true.
And get this, it was started by a queer woman.
Queer woman, yeah.
So today we're going to kind of use the lens of cult analysis to try to understand how this movement that started as a support group has evolved into something that's so often associated with anger and hate.
It is really interesting to look at it through that lens of cult analysis.
So let's start at the beginning.
Okay.
Can you tell us a bit more about the origins of the movement?
Yeah, so as we said, it actually started in the 90s.
Right.
And it was a queer woman who started it,
Right.
Alana's Involuntary Celibacy Project.
Okay.
And her intention was really to create a space for people who were struggling with relationships and loneliness.
Right.
So it was open to everyone, regardless of gender.
Yeah.
And it was really supposed to be a place for support and connection. But things kind of took a turn in the early 2000s when the movement shifted online and became very male-dominated.
So like places like
4chan, Reddit, those sorts of forums.
Right.
And that's where it really started to morph into something much more toxic and hateful.
So kind of lost that original message of inclusivity.
It did.
Right. And support.
Right.
So if we're thinking about this through the lens of cult analysis, what are some of the similarities you see?
Well, first, I think it's important to recognize that cults often target people who are vulnerable. Yeah. And the same is true with the incel community.
So who are we talking about when we say incel?
Right. So typically we're talking about young men who are feeling isolated and lonely. They may be struggling with mental health issues.
Right.
They may be dealing with rejection. Or they might have been bullied.
Yeah, those are all, you know, real struggles.
Absolutely. These are real people with real pain.
Right.
And it's that pain that makes them susceptible to these kinds of ideologies.
Well, playing on that vulnerability, like you were saying, that's
classic cult tactic.
Textbook.
Yeah.
So what happens then once someone kind of gets drawn into these online spaces?
Well, one of the first things that happens is they start to encounter this whole new language. Chad Stacey black pill.
Right. I'm an outsider, it sounds like.
It sounds bizarre, like a foreign language.
Klingon, but less romantic.
Right, exactly.
What's with all this jargon?
Well, that jargon is actually a really important part of the whole process.
Okay.
It creates this in-group, out-group dynamic. It's a way of distinguishing themselves from the rest of society.
So it kind of creates this...
sense of belonging.
Right, okay.
A sense of community.
Gotcha.
And it also reinforces their isolation from the mainstream.
Makes sense.
Which, of course, makes it harder for them to leave the community because they no longer feel like they fit in anywhere else.
So it's this kind of spiral.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about some of these specific terms.
Yeah.
What is a Chad?
So a Chad is basically the incel's idea of the ideal man.
Right.
He's conventionally attractive. He's muscular.
Yeah.
He's successful with women.
Yeah.
He's everything that the incel believes he is not.
All right. And what about Stacy?
Well, Stacy is the female equivalent of Chad.
Right.
She's the beautiful, unattainable woman who only dates Chads. She's seen as shallow and superficial.
Okay.
And incels believe that all women are like this.
So they have this very distorted view of women and relationships in general.
Absolutely.
And then there's the black pill.
Right.
This one seems particularly disturbing.
It is.
Can you explain what that's all about?
Sure. So the black pill is essentially the belief that your romantic fate is predetermined by your genetics.
Okay.
Specifically, your physical appearance.
So if you're not conventionally attractive, you're just doomed.
You're doomed to be alone.
There's no hope.
No hope.
It's all just...
Yeah, it's incredibly fatalistic.
Yeah, incredibly depressing.
And nihilistic.
So it's not just about being alone.
Right.
It's about this whole...
It's about believing that life is meaningless and that there's no point in even trying.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So it's really taking it to a whole other level.
Absolutely.
And how do these online forums contribute to all of this?
Yeah. Well, they create what we call an echo chamber, where these beliefs are constantly reinforced.
Right.
So you're surrounded by people who are saying the same things and confirming your biases. And any dissenting voices are quickly silenced.
So you're only
getting one side of the story, and that side of the story is incredibly bleak and hopeless.
I mean, you mentioned that sometimes people try to, offer counter arguments.
Right, they do.
They'll say, well, I know an incel who found a partner or something like that.
Yeah.
What happens in those cases?
Those stories are usually dismissed as either lies or proof that the person hasn't truly grasped the truth of the black pill.
So there's no winning.
There's no win.
It's just this self-fulfilling prophecy.
Exactly.
It's really scary.
It is, yeah.
So it sounds like this radicalization process is very gradual and insidious.
It is.
Can you walk us through kind of the steps of how this happens?
So researchers have actually identified kind of a 6-step pipeline that leads to this full ideological immersion.
Right.
So first you have that initial feeling of vulnerability and isolation, which we talked about earlier. And then the person discovers the incel ideology online.
So they find these communities.
They find these communities, right? And the ideology offers them a seemingly logical explanation for their pain.
So it gives them someone to blame.
Exactly.
Right.
It's not their fault.
Right.
It's society's fault.
It's women's fault.
It's women's fault. It's the chat's fault.
Gotcha.
And then they start to adopt the jargon and immerse themselves in the community.
Right.
And this leads to a narrowing of their perception of reality. They increasingly reject outside perspectives. And finally, they reach a point of full embrace of the ideology.
So that's the final step.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's
a process.
Yeah, step-by-step process.
Very much so.
Right, so we've painted a pretty bleak picture here.
We have.
Was there any hope?
There is hope.
Okay.
But early intervention is absolutely crucial.
Okay, so what did that look like?
Well, first, we need to be able to recognize the warning signs.
Okay.
Things like withdrawal, anger, adoption of the incel language.
Gotcha.
And then we need to offer alternative support systems.
So
like therapy support groups, mentoring programs, anything that can help these young men feel connected and valued.
Yeah, because ultimately that's what they're lacking.
Exactly.
That sense of connection.
Yeah.
So it's not just about addressing the individual's pain.
Right.
It's also about...
It's about addressing the societal factors that contribute to this problem.
Okay, so things like
toxic masculinity.
Right.
Harmful stereotypes about men and women, social isolation, all of these things play a role.
So it's a multifaceted problem.
Very much so.
That requires...
a multifaceted solution.
Right.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up here,
yeah,
what would you say are the key takeaways for our listeners?
Well, I think the biggest takeaway is that this is not just about internet trolls or angry young men.
Yeah.
These are real people who are struggling with real pain, and they found a toxic answer in the incel community.
So it's about understanding.
It's about understanding the human element behind the headlines.
Exactly.
Right.
It's about empathy.
And if this community thrives on isolation and despair, maybe the antidote is connection.
Maybe it is.
Creating spaces where young men feel seen and heard and valued.
Absolutely.
So what can our listeners do?
Well, they can start by educating themselves about the issue.
Okay.
They can support organizations that are working to combat social isolation and mental health issues.
Right.
And they can simply reach out to the young men in their lives and make sure they feel supported and connected. Even small actions can make a big difference.
Absolutely.
So if this deep dive got you thinking about, the pressures young men face in today's world, about masculinity, loneliness, the dangers of online echo chambers, that's a good thing.
It is.
That's where it starts.
It does, yeah.
Awareness is the first step.
Absolutely.
So think about what you can do to make a difference.
Even a small difference can have a ripple effect.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right, thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me.
It's been a really eye-opening conversation.
It has.
And I hope it's given our listeners some things to think about.
Me too.
All right, we'll see you next time.
Sounds good.
Take care.
You too. Bye. Bye.